The chill wind off Lake Michigan, even in early October, had a way of cutting straight to the bone in Chicago. It was 1993, and the city was a symphony of grit and ambition, its skyline a jagged promise against a perpetually gray sky. This was the world Detective Thomas Tom Miller inhabited, a world he saw with a clarity born of years navigating its shadows. Tom, 38, with the weary eyes of a man who'd seen too much but the stubborn jaw of one who refused to look away, was a fixture at the 14th District on Western Avenue. His beat was the sprawling, vibrant, often brutal tapestry of the city, and he knew its threads intimately. His apartment in Lincoln Park, a third-floor walk-up with peeling paint and character, was a sanctuary he shared with his wife, Sarah. Sarah, 35, a vibrant woman whose laugh could usually chase away the gloom, was a high school English teacher. She understood Tom's dedication, the long hours, the sudden calls in the dead of night. But lately, a new tension had begun to fray the edges of their domestic peace. Tom was working a particularly nasty case, a string of arsons linked to a powerful, shadowy syndicate rumored to be muscling into the construction industry, specifically targeting businesses that wouldn't play ball. It smelled of organized crime, but with a sophistication that went beyond typical street muscle. Just another late one, hun, Sarah would say, finding him hunched over case files at the kitchen table, the only light a single, anemic lamp. He'd grunt, run a hand through his perpetually disheveled dark hair, and offer a half-smile. Getting close, Sarah, too close for comfort, maybe. She'd press him gently about the specifics, but he'd clam up, a wall of professional reticence closing around him. Loose lips, honey, you know how it is. He'd started carrying his service revolver even when off duty, tucking it under his pillow at night. He claimed it was just precaution, but Sarah saw the tremor in his hands, the way his gaze would linger on shadows outside their window. He'd jump at the sudden ring of the landline, his pager a constant, an unwelcome companion. The first real warning sign wasn't a threat, but a shift in his demeanor. Tom, usually meticulous, became erratic. He'd snap at Sarah over trivial things, then immediately apologize, his eyes filled with a guilt she couldn't quite decipher. One evening he came home, visibly shaken. He wouldn't say why, just that he'd had a close call. He started leaving at odd hours, sometimes without explanation, just a vague, hurried goodbye. Gotta lead, Sarah, off the books. Gotta be careful, he had a source, he hinted, deep inside the network, feeding him whispers. He trusted this source, but knew it put them both at immense risk. Sarah begged him to share it with his partner, Detective Ricardo Ramirez, a seasoned veteran known for his unwavering loyalty. Can't, Sarah, this goes higher than you think, higher than the precinct. His voice was low, laced with a fear she hadn't heard before. The city, which had always felt like their home, now seemed to press in, a dangerous, breathing entity. October 17, 1993 dawned clear and crisp, a deceptive beauty. Tom had been up since before sunrise, on the phone in hushed tones. He'd left the apartment around 9 a.m., telling Sarah he had a meeting downtown, a confidential informant. He'd promised to be back for dinner. Sarah spent the day grading papers, an uneasy knot in her stomach. 6 o'clock came, then 7, then 8. His dinner sat untouched on the stove. She called his precinct. No one had seen him since morning. She called Ramirez at home. He hadn't heard from Tom since early afternoon. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. By midnight, she was at the 14th District, her voice hoarse, her eyes wide with terror. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. A detective was missing, a brother in blue. It was a personal affront to the entire force. Tom's beat-up, dark blue Ford Taurus was found abandoned on West Kinsey Street, near a disused warehouse district by the Chicago River. The engine was cold, the driver's side door slightly ajar, the interior light still on. His badge was clipped to his belt loop, tossed on the passenger seat. His wallet, untouched, lay beside it. No signs of struggle, no shattered glass, no blood. It was as if he'd simply stepped out of the car and vanished into the gritty Chicago night. The scene itself felt wrong, too clean, too deliberately staged. Detective Ramirez, a man whose stoicism rarely broke, was shattered. He spearheaded the search, his face grim, his focus absolute. Every alley, every bar, every known informant, every rival gang member, every disgruntled suspect Tom had ever put away was questioned. The Chicago media latched onto the story, plastering Tom's earnest, slightly tired face on every front page and newscast. CPD detective vanishes. Manhunt launched for missing officer. Sarah became a fragile public figure, appearing at press conferences, her pleas for information heartbreaking. The river was dragged, abandoned buildings were searched, but nothing. It was as if the city had simply swallowed him whole, leaving no trace. The vast, indifferent expanse of Lake Michigan seemed to mock their efforts. Weeks turned into months. The initial frenzy subsided, replaced by a dull ache of despair. Leads dried up, conflicting witness statements led nowhere. A transient claimed to see a black van, another a nondescript sedan. The sheer number of potential enemies Tom had made during his career made narrowing down suspects impossible. Was it the arson syndicate, a drug lord whose operation he'd crippled, a corrupt official he'd been investigating on the side? The answers remained elusive. Sarah, a woman once full of life, became a ghost, haunting their apartment, reliving every conversation, every unspoken fear. Ramirez, too, carried the burden, Tom's disappearance a personal failure he couldn't shake. The case slowly, agonizingly went cold, relegated to a dusty file in the cold case unit, another unsolved mystery in a city teeming with them. The once bright hope dwindled to a flicker, then to almost nothing. The phone calls from well-meaning friends and colleagues became less frequent, their words of comfort sounding hollow against the deafening silence of Tom's absence. She learned to live with the unanswered questions, but never to accept them. Each passing year, the city changed, new buildings rose, old ones fell, but for Sarah, time remained frozen in October 1993, 10 years later. The year was 2003. Chicago was still a city of contrasts, but its landscape was evolving. The downtown area was experiencing a revitalization, old industrial zones being razed for new developments. On a brisk Tuesday in late April, a demolition crew was clearing a derelict block on the city's south side, a forgotten area earmarked for a new commercial complex. The air hung thick with dust and the groan of heavy machinery. An excavator operator, a burly man named Gus, was tearing down the remains of what was once a small, standalone print shop, its brick facade crumbling. As his bucket scraped against the foundation, it snagged on something unexpected, something metallic, buried deep beneath layers of rubble and compacted earth. Curiosity piqued, Gus carefully maneuvered the machine. What he unearthed wasn't a pipe or a piece of old machinery, but a heavily corroded, rectangular metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox. It was meticulously sealed, its seams fused with decades of rust and grime. He called his foreman over, and together they pried it open with a crowbar. Inside, cushioned by layers of mud-stained, rotted canvas, were several items. The foreman, a former military man, immediately recognized a .38 caliber revolver, its bluing long gone, pitted by rust. But it was the other items that sent a shiver down his spine. A small, tarnished silver Zippo lighter, its surface engraved with the initials TM and a date, 5/15/85. A Chicago Police Department identification card, remarkably preserved in a waterproof pouch, though faded, bearing the face of a younger, Ernest Thomas Miller. And nestled beneath it all, a small, leather-bound journal, its pages water-damaged but still legible in places, along with a single, grainy, black-and-white photograph. The discovery wasn't just a curiosity. It was a ghost whispering from the grave. The foreman made the call to CPD, his voice tight with an urgency that transcended mere protocol. The news hit the 14th District like a seismic shock. Detective Ricardo Ramirez, now a grizzled lieutenant, felt the familiar cold knot in his stomach clench tighter. Tom Miller, his partner. After a decade of silence, something had finally surfaced. He drove to the scene, the air heavy with the ghosts of unfinished business. Seeing the lighter, the ID items he recognized instantly, was like a punch to the gut. The cold case, dormant for so long, was now violently, painfully resurrected. Sarah Miller, too, received the call. Her world, which she had carefully rebuilt into a fragile piece, shattered once more. A decade of unanswered questions, of living in a purgatorial limbo, was suddenly replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating sliver of hope. The contents of the box were meticulously analyzed by forensic teams. The revolver, while old and corroded, was identified as a standard police issue. 38. The Zippo lighter was indeed Tom's, a gift from Sarah on their anniversary. But it was the journal and the photograph that held the true, terrifying revelations. The journal, its ink bleeding in places, contained fragmented, coded entries, dates, names, and places that spoke of a deep, systemic corruption reaching far beyond street-level crime. Tom had been investigating a sophisticated money laundering operation tied to a seemingly legitimate construction firm, Horizon Builders, rumored to have deep connections to City Hall figures and a notorious crime syndicate. His source, cryptically referred to as the architect, was feeding him information about illicit contracts, kickbacks, and intimidation tactics. The last entry, dated October 16, 1993, read, "Meeting Architect. Crossroads, pray this isn't a dead end, too close. They know, King Street warehouse, basement." The photograph was a blurry, candid shot of a man in a dark suit, his face obscured by shadow, shaking hands with a prominent city councilman, Arthur Jenkins, outside a dimly lit building. The building itself was old, industrial, nondescript, precisely the kind of structure found in the abandoned warehouse district where Tom's car had been discovered. The journal, pieced together by a dedicated team of cold case detectives led by Ramirez, painted a chilling picture. Tom wasn't just missing, he had been investigating something so big, so entrenched, that he was seen as an unacceptable threat. He wasn't simply a victim of street violence. He was silenced by powerful men who operated with impunity. The confidential informant he'd mentioned to Sarah, the architect, was likely a crucial piece of this puzzle, perhaps someone who turned on him, or someone who tried to save him and failed. Lieutenant Ramirez, now fueled by a renewed, burning resolve, delved back into the labyrinthine world Tom had left behind. Horizon Builders had been dissolved years ago, its assets absorbed by a larger conglomerate. Arthur Jenkins had retired from politics, living a quiet life in a suburban mansion. The King Street warehouse, mentioned in the journal, had been demolished years earlier, making way for a new condominium complex. Every lead seemed to hit a wall, either bulldozed into oblivion or shielded by layers of legal protection and powerful influence. Ramirez interviewed Jenkins, now an elderly, frail man who feigned no recollection of Horizon Builders or any illicit dealings, dismissing the photograph as a campaign photo op with a constituent. Without a body, without a direct link, without the architect, the new evidence, while substantial, was largely circumstantial in court. The discovery, instead of bringing closure, brought a different kind of anguish. Sarah now knew, with sickening certainty, that Tom had been murdered, not merely disappeared. She knew he had died fighting corruption, his idealism ultimately costing him his life. But knowing what happened wasn't the same as knowing who and why definitively, or being able to bring them to justice. The journal provided a narrative, a chilling explanation, but the passage of 10 years had effectively erased the physical evidence needed for a conviction. The powerful figures Tom had been tracking had long since covered their tracks, their power enduring. The case remained open, but its future was grim. The discovery of the box served not as a solution, but as a testament to Detective Thomas Miller's unwavering commitment to justice and a stark reminder of the city's darker underbelly, where even the most dedicated sometimes vanished without a trace. His legacy was the truth he unearthed, buried for a decade, a truth that surfaced to haunt Chicago, a whisper of institutional failure and a man's courage. Sarah continued to live in Chicago, carrying the heavy weight of a truth partially revealed, but forever denied the full measure of justice, the harsh winds off the lake a constant, mournful reminder of what the city had taken. Jar count placeholder.